My talk will be on, as I said, on the vulnerabilities of the European Union. We have already had a very impressive reports by Draghi. So I would like to concentrate, to focus more on the differences between the member states of Europe in terms of these vulnerabilities, decarbonization, competitiveness, innovation. So I will focus on the heterogeneity of member states in order to see what the industrial policy can do and what cannot do for reducing the differences between countries and increasing cohesion. So the focus is on the heterogeneity between member states in terms of opportunities and in terms of costs or vulnerabilities, with the idea that the industrial policy, that an industrial policy that does not take these differences into account will end up in exacerbating internal divergences with negative implications for the union's cohesion and growth. The idea is that we cannot look at Nordic countries or core countries and think that they can go alone. The European Union, in the changed international environment, needs a united union. And also the welfare of the peripheral countries is important in order to achieve not only cohesion but growth. This is the end conclusion of my talk. So let's start with the decarbonization, with the three vulnerabilities that I have mentioned. Decarbonization. One important thing is that this energy crisis is different from the previous one. This is an idiosyncratic shock for the European Union. The previous oil crises were crises that affected also the United States or Japan, all other countries. Now it's Europe that is mostly affected. And so there is this difference with the past crisis, and there is a difference between countries because the various countries have different specialization and have different energy dependencies from Russia. So you can see that if we look at the vulnerability in terms of the share of energy-intensive industries measured in terms of employment, within the different countries, we don't have a north-south divide, but we have a sort of east-west divide, with Germany, which is as much affected as Italy or as the eastern countries from the energy crisis, which is a novelty. If we look at the potentialities, well, the European Union as a whole is not badly equipped with new energies, clean technologies. We measure them in terms of patents, which have problems, but it's the only thing that we can manage fairly simply. So the European Union is a world leader in clean technologies, wind turbines, electrolyzers, low carbon fuels, and all that. But you can see the very rapid increase of the share of China in terms of applications for patents. So there is let's say, an advantage of Europe, but there is also a challenge which is coming very, very quick. But what about the potentialities and the vulnerability within the European Union? So we had tried with some friends, Guarascio and Reilich, a mapping as an exercise. We have tried to see how the share of energy-intensive industries plus automotive, which is another sector which is not very much energy-intensive, but is very energy-intensive in terms of the use of the product, so it has problems. So how do the different member states position themselves on the green transition when you compare the share of the energy-intensive industry plus automotive with the share of renewable energy in total energy and the relative specialization in green technologies, as measured by which is a measure of the resilience of the member states to energy shocks and their capacity to master the green technologies on the one hand, and on the other, what is the dispersion of the state aid aimed at environmental protection, which is a proxy of the member state fiscal space and commitment to green industrial policies. So we have the first graph, which shows on the vertical axis the employment share of energy-intensive industries plus automotive. And you can see that, well, I don't know if this, no. Well, you can see on the vertical, the vertical line is the European average. So you can see that, and the horizontal line as well. So you can see that all the Eastern countries, the Visegrad countries, Germany and Italy, have the highest share of energy-intensive industries and a lower share of renewables in their energy mix. They are on the left-hand side and on the top of the graph. While Nordic countries have a lower share of energy-intensive industries and a higher share of renewables in their energy mix. So we have a problem here in terms of capacity to replace the energy mix with renewables for those who are more affected by the energy crisis. And if we look at the relative specialization in green technologies, measured, as I said, in terms of patents, the share of patents in total, green patents in total patents relative to the world average, OECD. And we can see, so we have on the vertical axis still the share of the energy-intensive industries, and on the horizontal axis now we have the relative specialization in clean energy. So we see that this share of patents, of green patents, is higher in the core, Germany, Austria, the Nordics, you can see the Denmark down there, and it is more problematic in the peripheries. So once again, an indicator of weakness of the peripheries. And finally, we look at the share of state aid targeted to the environment. And here we see that there is Germany down there at the bottom right hand. There is the greater fiscal capacity of core countries to support restructuring of the green transition, while there is no clear correlation between expected restructuring costs and policy commitments as proxied by the environment state aid. So what conclusion can we draw from this? Well, there are old and new asymmetries, but decarbonization has the potential to reshape the geography of comparative advantage and industrial specialization in Europe, reinforcing existing divisions, north, south, east. And so the lack of a centrally coordinated policy capable of addressing the different vulnerabilities of member countries may jeopardize the European Union collective climate objectives. A first point, we need a policy which looks at the different potentialities and vulnerabilities of the member countries. The second point is competitiveness, and here we talk about China. China has made a very, very rapid upgrade in its specialization, As a consequence, the competition with the Western countries and with the European member countries has shifted from the southern periphery. When China entered the World Trade Organization, its competition was mainly with the southern European countries, with Italy, and it exported these cheap consumer goods to Germany, which could afford to make a sort of wage repression because the consumer goods were coming from cheap from China. So it was a competition with Italy, which somehow benefited Germany. But now the specialization of China has moved up, and now it is competing directly with Germany. And we can see, we skip this one because there is no time, but you can see the number of product categories in which both China, on the one hand, and Italy, Germany, Japan, on the other, have a comparative advantage. So there is an overlapping or a direct competition. And you can see that Italy started from already, it moved from the 2000 to 2023. And you can see that Italy had already a very high number of sectors in which it was competing directly with China, and this number has increased. But Germany, which started from a lower level, has had an incredibly quick increase in the number of countries in which it is competing with China as well. So we have this asymmetric interdependence, mostly between China and Germany, but between China and the whole of Europe. The Chinese market is very relevant for exports and for local production. German firms have gone to China to produce directly there for the market, for the Chinese market. It is important in terms of imports of inputs and technology. And more we see a reverse engineering. That is, we are importing, German firms are importing technology from China. The case of automotive is emblematic. Western automakers are scrambling to catch up, partnering with Chinese companies across the entire value chain to access Chinese technology and know-how. So we have this, let's say, asymmetric relation, but now that the Chinese economy is slowing down, we have the result of this previous massive investment of Chinese firms in several sectors, which is creating problems with the Western competitors because there is this overcapacity, which is unleashing a fierce price war, which squeezes margins, leads to bankruptcies and industry consolidation in China, but leads also to a flooding of foreign markets. And this is eroding market share of Western competitors. Is this a problem only for Germany? Well, of course not, because Germany is the main country in Europe. And as we used to know, when Germany gets a cold, Europe gets pneumonia. So that's a problem. The third point is the failure to innovate. Fuest and others have explained the delay of the European and German industry in terms of the digital technologies or the technologies in general, with saying that they have been stuck in a middle technology trap. Well, this is not an explanation. Why the United States and China, which were in the 20s specialized in the same technologies, managed to move forward? So we should try to look at the reasons why the European industry has been stuck in a middle technology. And I suggest two kinds of explanation. Macro factors, the market ideology and the fiscal virtue that has been ruling in Europe from the last decades, Germany actually wasted the golden decade. When the interest rate was negative, Germany went for budget surpluses and wasted the occasion for investment. A conservative macroeconomic governance then backfired. Innovation requires a growing demand, bigger markets, more investment, and industrial guidance, as the United States and China industrial policies show. I can't go deep in this. But there are also perhaps micro reasons that we should investigate more in detail. There has been a myopia or complacency, surely by the German automotive companies, when they could sell whatever they wanted, and the capital goods industries, they could sell whatever they wanted when China was rising so quickly in the 10s and 20s. And so they sort of failed to grasp the potential of new technologies, resisted the green transition, blocking the decarbonization, remember the Dieselgate, and influencing European regulatory policies. So these things must be investigated more in detail. But we should bear in mind that the delay in the digital sector has an effect on the competitiveness of the entire industry as far as these digital devices enter into any kind of production. So the European Union eventually responded to the challenge with industrial policy. There has been a swift turnaround since 2017 with multiple tools. And there has also been multiple purposes. Decarbonization, catching up in green and digital technologies, the risk, growth, cohesion, and with so many objectives, there has been this ambitious agenda lacks a strategy to ensure its achievement and to address internal conflicts and policy dilemmas. There is one point which we should remember on industrial policy. Well, it makes one thing that the ideology of market doesn't. It exposes the multiple conflicting interests within countries. While if you have the ideology of the market, if you are not succeeding, it's your fault. You are not efficient, you are not competitive. But if there is an industrial policy, then what the government or the governments are doing are very evident. And so the conflicting interests of member states are open. There is a lack of agreement on common financing, which has led has left the task of financing of the transition to the states. No common funding. So there has been the freedom of state aid liberalization, but this risks a subsidy war. Every country is subsidizing its own industry in order to attract investment in a zero-sum game. And those countries which have, as we saw in the graph before, have less fiscal capacity are falling behind. But even the protectionist policy that the European Union seems to now accept risks further distort the functioning of the single market. For instance, in the case where foreign direct investment that are trying to circumvent protection, maybe they are mainly directed towards low cost, more generous, or politically friendly countries. No need to name countries. And there is also the clash between countries. For instance, import duties on Chinese vehicles was opposed by Berlin and its automotive companies because they were fearful of negative repercussions on Sino-German trade relations. So when we decide to act, there are choices to be made and conflicts to be accommodated. And there are there might be conflicts between the companies and their own states or the other states. The choice to leave the direction of change to companies may conflict with broader national economic interests. Again, firms don't know better, as it was demonstrated by the strategy of the European car makers to favor the most profitable premium cars. The bigger the car, the greater your profit. And now the market for electric vehicles is under the challenge of the Chinese cars that are smaller, cheaper, and equally good. So there might also be a conflict between the delocalization of production with the defense of your own industry and all the value chain that is connected with the final industry. Once again, think of the automotive industry. And again, decision about which plants to close and which suppliers to penalize can go beyond the corporate sphere. How to reconcile the conflicting interests between the various national industries and their governments becomes a thorny political problem. For instance, now Volkswagen has announced that it has to close 2 plants. Is it going to close the plants here, or there will be pressure in order to close plants somewhere else? This is a political problem for the European Union as a whole, and we cannot think that it is not, or make as it is not there. Innovation clusters versus cohesion, yes. Well, Dr. Herr has already explained the importance of innovation clusters. And so it is important because there will be spillover for all the region or the cluster or the district. But spatial concentration of innovations engenders large and persistent regional disparities. And there are studies, empirical studies, that have shown that high levels of concentration of key technologies in the more developed regions lead to these differences because these developed regions mainly collaborate with each other. So, and besides, creation may occur in a different place from where destruction occurs. When we talk about creative destruction, well, where does it occur, creation, and where does it occur, destruction is an important point. So, innovation policies, which are important, must go hand in hand with a new type of cohesion policies that care about lagging regions and promote interregional collaboration. This is my point. Well, we can go pretty quick here. There is this trade-off between importing cheap, clean technologies and safeguarding our industrial structure. And we have to choose, or better to try to find a combination between these two different target objectives. And I think that if properly managed and monitored, collaboration with China on green technologies could reduce the costs of decarbonization. Western automakers are already collaborating with Chinese companies to produce cheaper and more attractive electric vehicles, both in China, mostly in China. So Chinese foreign direct investment could come to Europe in joint venture with European companies, but there must be integrated within a European common policy preventing competition between member states, and also some sort of control of these Chinese firms. I'm not a fan of Chinese direct investment because, I mean, for instance, and well, I can't, but BYD, which is the most successful Chinese company, is not interested in entering in joint venture with a European company. It can do alone. And when we talk about joint companies in the automotive industries, the Chinese firms are not the top ones, are the fourth, fifth. So this is also a thing that must be considered. The final conclusion, and if left unanswered, the economic and social costs of green policies could jeopardize the goal of climate neutrality in 2050. So, no. Just 2 minutes in order to conclude. From all what I've said, and looking at the experience of other countries that have implemented a successful industrial policy, China, the United States, Japan. So we can draw these conclusions that an integrated approach to innovation and growth is indispensable. Industrial, trade, financial, macroeconomic, and cohesion policies must be taken together. And we need a European Union financing of investment of public goods. Coordination is essential, but we also need public-private partnership, public procurement, which are conditional on domestic content to sustain domestic production. We need a shared strategy to address regional inequalities, enhancing elements of common interest to avoid internal competition between states. There might be, there are possibilities of common interest. For instance, renewable energy. The southern countries are endowed with the possibility to produce clean energy. Or the interregional, intercountry cooperation, for instance, Horizon, or the important program of common European interest, or that whatever it is. These are collaboration and it must be made even more compulsive in order to make the lagging behind regions to partake with the innovation of the leading countries. And of course, macroeconomic and labor policy. We cannot leave even our population behind. So support demand, innovation, the promotion of skills in order to take advantage of the common market. This approach requires a strong political leadership at European level, a long-term strategic vision, and a shared commitment from all member states. In the current context, a fragmented, divided Europe is doomed to decline. Thank you.